welcome everyone to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man, and I am Michael Lyons.
Mm-hmm. And I'm Margaret.
And we are both a little under the weather tonight.
Mm-hmm.
We do not have the dropsy, though.
Whatever this cold thing is that everybody's giving to everybody else.
That everybody's giving to everybody else. So we are going to do, in honor of our illness, one of our semi-recurring features, which we call Poetry Night. Scott's in the back there, just sawing at one wrist dutifully. No, well, Poetry Night is always, it's one of my favorites. I like Poetry Night, but not everybody does. But we like to pick interesting authors. We have a few favorites, and in this case, we're going to go back to someone we haven't had a work on from them in a while, and that's Kalil Gibran, who's really one of the more eloquent and passionate poets of the 20th century, and he has such incredible depth and I would say, Margaret, very relevant, relevant to the current moment, to the zeitgeist of 2024.
Yeah, no, his depth of expression for an emotion by giving you amazing analogies to transport you into a state where you sit there and you go, I felt that way.
Yeah. He has the enviable ability to capture an emotion. I mean, some poets, Longfellow or Frost, have just these beautiful situational, like beautiful turns of phrase or beautiful alliteration or syncopation, or the words they form a sort of a melody, a music. Yeah. But Gibran is not necessarily like that. He's got scansion and meter and all those kinds of things, but where he grabs you by the throat is the emotion, the passion. It stops you dead in your tracks, and it crystallizes something that he experienced, because he's able to unify it to the overall human experience of life and death and the things that really matter. What Hemingway always said, write about what hurts. Write about things that really matter, and put it all out on the paper and make your emotions bleed onto the page. Well, in another way, Gibran is able to do that and able to, as you said very aptly, transport us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. He has an amazing turn of phrase that brings you from one point of perception to another.
Seemingly effortlessly.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, as anyone who has tried to write poetically, not even poems, but poetically, it's very, very difficult. I have been accused in some of my writings of writing in a poetic style, and I always take that as very high praise, because first of all, I wouldn't dream to call myself a poet. It's really beyond my ability. And I do try to make things, sort of, I would say sort of a cinematic style when I write them. I try to set the scene and let you live the scene and feel what the character is feeling. But true poetry, it doesn't guide you into the character. It thrusts the character into your psyche and says, here, this part of you that's been hurting, this part of you which has no voice, here's its voice, here's its pain. And you go, wow, you're saying things that I only dreamed that I could express. And it transports you from this kind of mute ache or feeling that you can't find words for. And then the poet gives you these words, and you go, yes, this is what I feel. This is what I, the depth of my unexpressed thoughts are as though they were being read by this poet without ever having met me. In this case, Kalil has passed on these many years ago, and yet because it's good poetry, because it's great poetry, it's timeless, like all poetry, and it can be written 50 years ago or 500 years ago. And it meets us in the moment of now, which is the timeless moment, the eternal moment, and gives us something that we know we have within us. And the poet illuminates it. Says, look, this is you. This is how you feel. Live this moment with me.
Mm-hmm.
And you're transported.
This is the human experience. You're not the only one who feels this way.
It's very connective, exactly.
Mm-hmm. And once you realize that, those detached emotions or unattached experiences, suddenly they gel. And you go, oh, is that really what it is? Kind of gives you a perspective. Because sometimes if you haven't had an experience like that before, you think that, it's just got to be me. I'm not...
No one else feels this way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm alone. Everyone will laugh at me if I try to tell them these feelings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's got to be me. No one else can understand this. But when you read good poetry, and it brings you to the point of re-experiencing the emotion itself, and you realize that, it is as deep as when I first felt this.
Mm-hmm.
And this person is feeling it. The human experience.
Yes. It's very similar in a different way with the Longfellow poem. We've gone through it before, but the Psalm of Life. And that poem spoke to Christopher so deeply and viscerally that it awoke within him, amongst other things, it awoke within him a being, it allowed him to touch into the being that he really was, the eternal part of him, the part of him that didn't matter what he was going through here. Being the hero in the strife really, really spoke to him. And it allowed him to say, yes, that's me. That's all of us, but that's me. I'm the hero in the strife. I have to persevere. I have to overcome. I have to be myself. And that without that poem, he might have come to it in another way. But that's what great, I don't want to belabor the point, but that's what great poetry does. It reaches into you and tells you something that you already know, but you didn't know you knew.
Well, it crystallizes it in a form that more of you can understand what it was that you were experiencing. Because not every part of you talks to every other part of you.
It's very true.
It's like one part of you that like goes blithering off on something, and
some people, that's all their parts.
That's well, it's the only part that is allowed to talk, that won't let go of the mic. But it allows for that understanding that disjointed or disconnected part doesn't have the ability to have the words. Suddenly you're like, oh, wait a minute. That's when the consciousness focuses to those unspoken feelings or emotions or experiences, and it gives it a voice.
And it illuminates and it teaches. It crystallizes it, but it also brings it into the forefront and allows it to, as you said, communicate to the other parts of you and realize that you're much vaster. that's the other thing with poetry is it's a, the old phrase mind expanding, but it is an expansion of being. Mind is always too small, but an expansion of your being, or a unveiling is probably even better, because the being is there, but it's veiled. It's veiled in ego, it's veiled in thoughts, veiled in all these things. And the poet is able to slice through the veils and say, look, here, my being to yours, here's a gift. And you accept it in the spirit, a precious gift that you can pass on to another. You can say, look, these beautiful words meant something to me. I want you to share them with you, just as the poet shares them with all of us.
Yes.
So, we've been going on and on about Kalil Gibran, but tonight's poem is entitled Fear. And I think it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's quite apropos to the times that we live in, because I think there's a lot of fear in the current society, in the current state of the world. And fear, as was said many, many years ago by Frank Herbert, I believe, in the beautiful SF series Dune, fear is the mind killer. Fear, he said mind killer, but really fear is the way the mind uses, or the ego uses, to suppress the being, to get you to react, to get you to act, and act unconsciously, or act defensively, or act aggressively, or be controlled. Especially societies use fear. And fear is being engendered and inculcated into the society today, perhaps in greater amounts or greater frequency. I'm not sure exactly the word I'm looking for, but to the extent that fear was always present in certain times throughout the history of human beings on this planet, and used to control. This is one of those times. This is one of those times where it's quite apparent that fear is being used as a cudgel and as a method of control and of to guide you to do what those who wish to sow fear want you to do. So anyway, this poem by Kalil Gibran is quite small and short, and I'm going to read it through, and then we'll go through it a bit. Because I know your voice is a little compromised. So would you mind if I do that?
Yes, please.
My voice is also a little compromised. I think I mentioned this to the audience in the past, but when I have a cold, I do sound sexy.
Oh.
Come on now. You all know it's true. No? All right, so Fear by Kalil Gibran. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled, from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road crossing forests and villages, and in front of her she sees an ocean so vast that to enter there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will fear disappear. Because that's where the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. Kalil Gibran. So this is a beautiful analogy of life and an even more poignant analogy of death, in my opinion.
Yes.
We are the river. We start out as just drops in the mountains, flowing into, larger and more briskly running streams, always flowing downhill, sometimes winding back and forth and so on, sometimes perhaps bringing life to a particular village or to water the crops of a farmer or so on, certainly giving life to many animals and trees and plants. So we touch things as we flow through life. Our essence nourishes. Our essence grows as we pass along through. But there's an end. There's an end, and often on the Soul of Everyman we talk about no one gets off the planet alive. Every river meets the sea. And Gibran, in thinking of that image, what struck him, I think I can say, what struck him was that, yes, the river must be afraid, because what happens when you meet this vast, trackless sea? You get lost. Where am I? Where is the river in the sea? Well, it's nowhere. Or that's one way to think about it. You can say, well, what happens to my life when I pass through the door into death? Well, I'm nowhere. I'm nothing. I've lost myself. I've lost my way.
And therein lies the fear.
Therein lies the fear. And this evokes from within all of us this nameless fear that people don't want to talk about, the fear of non-existence, the fear of dissolution, and the fear of, in essence, of death. And he nails it. He nails it so beautifully that in, 6 or 7 paragraphs, he has encapsulated the feeling of both living and dying, and the fear, the sweetness of life, and yet the kernel of it, which is the fear of death, of the end of life, of what happens when life ends. And this ability, so I'll give a parenthetic phrase for a minute. This ability to do that is so special and unique that it makes you stop. It makes you literally stop and sit down and look at this poem and go, wow, what great, what incredible channel of source energy came into this being, into this person, Kalil Gibran, to allow him to put this down in a form that we can all appreciate. The last paragraph here, Mark, because only then will fear disappear. You need to take the risk. So it's a risk.
Yeah.
But isn't this an interesting way of putting it? Take the risk to enter the sea. People, I think, Margaret, when they think about death, they think they don't have a choice. Death's just going to come. And there's not a thing I can do about it. So let me just ignore it all the way through to the end and enter into it unconsciously. And I'm not saying you should off yourself. You don't want to choose death actively. But in the moment of your death, and I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is part of the Tibetan way of living and dying, is that you accept your death. You accept that this is the end and that you're going into a new existence, another existence. You're returning back to, well, it could be lots of things, but returning back to source. And reconnecting. It's we mentioned this a couple weeks ago. Tecumseh, it's a good day to die, but it's also a good day to sing the song of your life.
Right.
And in reconnecting to source, you bring back, the river, all the things the river did before this, all the paths she traveled, from the mountains through the valleys and through the forests and through the plains and through the villages and all the things she did, she brings those with her. She's a unique form, a unique spirit, a unique soul with all these experiences. And the ocean needs the river. The ocean needs those experiences to be joined back to it. It's the only way the ocean gets any new experiences. The ocean is just the ocean. It's not able, it's not incarnate, it's not within existence. It's on the other side. It's vast, it's trackless, it's depthless. But yet it needs to experience what we have here.
It's part of the cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Because although the ocean contains the water, and the water being part of the cycle of rain and whatnot, got to start, and it has its experience, and then travels its unique paths. I mean, every river has a unique path.
Mm.
So there's a lot of analogies that happen with this. And the idea that the river trembles with fear before entering the sea is interesting, because it's an unknown that's much larger than anything it's ever experienced. That's the analogy. And to let you know that, hey, if your fear is rising because you feel like you will disappear into the ocean, but you're not concentrating on the fact that you're becoming the ocean.
Yeah.
You're not thinking about what it would be like to be part of the ocean. You're actually in an experience of being the ocean, being the vastness, being part of that cycle, being part of something far greater. It sort of reminds me when it's written in the Bible where God says, "My word does not return void to me." Being the water that goes out from that vastness and nourishes everything that it touches, and then has to return back. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, there's also the story of the talents. And it's a little bit of a stretch, but those are the same sort of things. That which you're entrusted with, which is your life. Talents is just an analogy of that. You're given certain, unique capabilities and unique characteristics. And you're a unique river. But yet, as you flow through existence, as you flow through the incarnation, you change that which you touch, and you are changed by that which touches you, and you gather all that up. The river, it's another interesting. It's not said here, but rivers always bear traces of where they came from. If you're starting on a mountain,
right,
you're bringing pieces of the mountain with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go through the plains, you bring pieces of the plains with you. Rivers, like life, they transport things with them. They don't. It isn't a sterile, okay, we're in a tube and we just go down the mountain and pour out into the ocean. No. All the way down, the flavor, the texture, the color, what's in the river, everything changes. And the river becomes narrower and swifter or broader and deeper or foamier or dirtier or cleaner, who knows what.
Whatever it encountered, but it's still water.
Yes.
That is a cleansing agent.
Yes.
And a moving agent.
Yes, it's very much a moving meditation too. If you think about the way he's talking about, what I'll just say, I love when he personalizes the river in the second paragraph. It goes from, "It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear." And then she, you know immediately who he's talking about. You don't go, "Who's she?" She is the river. And I think that's a common way of referring to things of beauty and grace with the feminine gender. But this river, this particular river, it's like Kalil knows this river. This river is some being maybe that he's actually writing about it or personifying. She looks back at the path she has traveled, and it may be someone he loved who was at the or near to the end of their life. And you do. It's the life review. It's the again, the kind of the Tecumseh analogy is that when you come to the door, when you see that now this is the end of my life. It has run its course. The vast ocean is in front of me. There's a review. There's a gathering of your experience, a synthesis of what happened and what changed you through the course of your life. And you gather it, almost, it doesn't require you to say, well, I'm going to gather all my experiences now and write them all down. No, you gather them almost as a condition of passage. It's sort of like your ticket. Here's my life. Here's what I did with my life. Here's my song. And I want to sing it as I enter into source. I return back to him. We always talk about that returning. The river, you mentioned it earlier too. The cycle of water is exactly that. Where do the drops come from on the mountaintops? Well, they come from the sea. And they make their way all the way down. So from source, the vast, endless sea, the sea with no identity, come the drops which are uniquely you and me. And those drops spend their whole existence in the temporal plane flowing back to the sea. And it's inexorable. It doesn't matter how long your life is or how short.
Mm-hmm.
You came in, you flowed, and you rejoined source. And that's a life.
Yes.
And people say, well, it was such a short life, it was such a long life.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. If you live your life the way Gibran is talking about here, in full knowledge, then whatever length it was matters not. And in fact, it's a silly question. It's a question which has no semantic attachment. How long a life do you need? There's no need for a length of a life. But if you take a life and honor it as the precious being, the moment of now, then whatever period of time it is sufficient and perfect. We said that about Christopher's life. His life was sufficient, and he lived it to the very end, to the top, to what he could do at every moment of that life. We were happy to make sure that nothing burdened him and made him feel that he wasn't having that sort of experience. Of course, he took it and ran with it, but certainly there could be a moment in the beginning where you say, well, you have to guide this person into realizing that their being, that their life length doesn't matter, but their being in their life does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. Allowing the images, this is what he's particularly good at, Gibran. The images are put together in a way that makes you realize the depth and the extent of the experience, which is a very hard thing to do. To sometimes just talking to another human being, trying to communicate that, you're trying to find this place, and, everything goes awry. To be able to craft these images so that you understand that what he's actually describing is on multiple levels. Not just the basic one of the water entering into the sea, but understanding that as a human being, if I were the river, what would I feel looking at that vastness? Realizing that that's where I'm headed. And he said here, you can't go back. Going back is impossible in existence. And then the line, the river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean. Now that, you sit there and you go, interesting. Because when you take a risk of something, you basically sit there and you've evaluated it and say, okay, I'll take a chance. I'm going to go look at it straight on.
Yes.
And I believe this is what he means, to be able to grasp what's ahead with two hands and embrace whatever's coming at you. And when you do that, when you've gone through that evaluation of, okay, this is what I don't know, what I do know, but I'm taking the risk. I'm going to live. I'm going to do this. That's when fear doesn't matter anymore.
I would say, Margaret, it's the definition of faith.
Yes.
And, faith is, in essence, doing something, stepping into the void. We were very familiar with this, again, with Christopher and our experience. When we were handed his diagnosis and our lives became chaos, the only thing we could do was walk with faith, if you will. And I'm not talking about we had to, go and, read 50 passages out of the Bible or something. No. The faith I'm talking about is that you are stepping into the void, not knowing. You're taking the risk that your feet are going to hit something solid because you are given no assurances. And to accept your life as a being, and we've said this many times before, if you're living in the moment of now, anything can happen, and you have to accept that. And you only have one thing you can control, not where you're going to put your foot, but whether or not you're going to put your foot. It doesn't matter that it's going to land on something solid or not, but you have to decide to take the risk. You have to live in the moment of now, knowing anything can happen, and the only thing you have to control, if you will, is your reaction, and then your next action, which is not outcome. It's just an action. The action may be to do nothing, but the point being is that here, at the end, you still have the choice. In fact, it's the most important choice, to accept where you are and to take the risk of, as Margaret just said, with eyes wide open, flowing into the sea. The river can fight it every step of the way, and no matter what, it will end up in the sea. And you can go into death fearful, and your song will be very poor. But if you go into it realizing that every bend in your river, every meter that you flowed was an opportunity to be, and that even though every being moment brought you closer to the moment when you would flow back into the ocean, you don't care about that. You're not saying, well, how many moments more do I have? I've got 17 more moments. No, every moment is a timeless moment. And then when you are at the moment and you flow into the sea, you take the risk and realize exactly what he says at the very end, that it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean, or in essence, realizing that that's source. That's all. That's the emanation from which you came. You are the emanation of source. And that, as Tolle says, your consciousness, first of all, frees itself from the dragging veils of ego and mind and all those things, the pain body and everything else, and then realizes that it is aware, it is a consciousness, and then realizes that it is just an emanation of source, and that there is nothing. Form all fades away, but you have your consciousness, which is the consciousness of all, the entire creation, the entire universe. So flowing into the sea, yes, sure. Your form dissolves. The river doesn't look like a river anymore. But your energy continues on. And it cannot be said to be your energy anymore. But it was never your energy.
Correct.
But you're still a very unique river. But you didn't own yourself in that regard. The energy was source. But you're given this, a gift, the gift of life. You're given this gift to be, be.
To appreciate life and the ability to love, to love what is around you, to love other people, just to love. I mean, that's the hardest lesson that we all have down here, is to understand that everyone is going through moments like this, where you don't necessarily have the opportunity to appreciate, another person going through trials. Most people don't care. Oh, they're having a hard time. I'm going to go with you and do this. And there's no compassion. And not to acknowledge the fact that, everyone has got a broken part to them. So you're just broken in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes you learn through those pathways how to be compassionate for other people. Otherwise you would never have had it. And you think you would have had it. You think you know everything. Let's face it.
Well, yes.
Humans always believe they know everything until they actually have a real experience of it, and they go, oh, gee, I really didn't know about that.
Yes.
Very, very rare person that knows that they don't know. I've very rarely found a person who can say that, who understands that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the ego also never wants to say, I don't know, or I was wrong. Those are two things the ego eschews, as an anathema. But the veil of the ego is pierced here. Fear is a wonderful title for this poem, because fear is one of the biggest veils that is used to obstruct the being. One of the ego has all sorts of fears. What if people don't like me? What if I'm wrong? What if somebody wants to hurt me? What if this goes wrong or that goes wrong? Or shouldn't I have 7 or 8 more forms of insurance? And I've done everything, but maybe I should worry about it more. Or what was the funny one? Stop for a minute and let me overthink this, or whatever the heck it is, a phrase like that. The ego loves fear. It loves to talk about fear. I think we're all probably familiar with people whose their conversations revolve about what's going to go wrong next, and everything's always a dumpster fire disaster. And if everything's going right, they're the person who's going to You say, yeah, but something's about to go wrong. You know, this don't enjoy it. It's going to go bad this way. It's going to go bad that way. Some people online refer to them as doomers, right? Mm-hmm. Or they call them black pillars. So everything, there's the red pill and the blue pill, and then there's the black pill. The black pill is everything's always horrible all the time. Mm-hmm. And you know, if anybody who has any smidgen of hope, you want to crush it immediately because don't you understand? You're just a fool. You know, that's the black pillars. So the doomers or the black pillars love fear. Everything that they do is the ego's expression of what could go wrong next. And if it doesn't go wrong, they say, well, no, but something else will happen. Absolutely, it's going to be this, going to be that. They love predicting disaster because people react. It's an interesting, again, sort of a human nature thing, where people, if you tell them a negative thing and a positive thing, you know, you could win $1,000. Or if you step into this door, this horrible thing's going to happen to you. People will almost immediately believe the horrible thing. And they will almost immediately scoff at the wonderful thing. But in the true sense of being, anything is possible. You know, we learned that, again, in the depths of the cancer wards in Memorial Sloan Kettering. If you wanted to be a doomer, that was your place. Everything was doom and gloom there.
God.
Everything. It was always about what was going to go wrong next.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to live that way, it's a short and nasty. It's very Hobbesian. It's nasty, brutish, and short. The key that you get to is that you just told me all these things, and you looked them straight in the eye and said, you don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know what's going to happen. You're telling me all these doomer things, but you've got absolutely no control over the next moment of now. And that scares the heck out of them. And so, yes, I've heard everything you said, all the doomy things that you said. I'm going to do this. And they're like, you're a fool. I'm like, oh, well. Still my choice, right? Right? Still my choice? Well, yes, but you're not doing it right. Uh-huh. Yes, but in this moment of now, that's what we're going to do. We're going to live anyway. We're going to enjoy it anyway. And that is piercing this huge cloud of doomer fear. And it's all in this poem in that regard. People live their life as a river, you know, in fear. You know, oh, what could happen here? I could go dry. I could wander around in the forest forever. I could, you know, all these kinds of things. It could get cold and I get frozen, you know, blah, blah, blah. You're stretching the analogy. But the point is that if you instead of living your life, spend all your time wondering about what's going to happen next to me in the river, as a river, and where am I going to flow to next, and should I flow this way or should I flow that way? And people say this, people say that. It's like the Scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz. So fear is not just the mind killer. Fear is the ego whip. It's what's used to take you out of being. It's what's used to say to you, you're a fool for living. Join me in my fear. Join me in worrying about everything. You know, it's the only way to be safe. You know, never take a step into the unknown. You have to know.
Yeah.
I want better odds. You know?
You want to control everything.
You want to control everything.
And it doesn't work that way. This is not the way this world has been set up.
And accepting that, people have a lot of trouble with that.
Yeah. It's not an easy place to be because you realize how much of what you've been participating in has been an illusion. And it's kind of like, if you think of that pathway where the whole of the river is making its way, you realize that the boundaries that it has been traveling through, the riverbank, if you would, everything that it's been going through has shaped the pathway itself, the water itself.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no, how do I say this? There is no backseas. A lot of people live in terms of regret. Yes. I could have, should have, would have.
That's a big one.
And, if only I did this or that, and then this chunk of rock over here would have been moved over there.
Yes.
And it's like, it really, people get concerned over things like that, as opposed to understanding that you're a river. You're supposed to flow. This is your life path. You're supposed to flow.
Mm-hmm. If the river thought about what it was going to do next all the time, it wouldn't move at all.
Petrified.
Petrified. This river, which is your life. It's an interesting thing, Margaret, and this I'll just say, your life flows. There's not one thing you can do to stop it flowing, but you can be unmindful of it. Your life, your river flows because it's inexorably bound to this existence. As Gibran very, very presciently says, nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. There are no backseas. And no matter what, you can't say, well, if I did this and if it, wait a minute. Let me just start over. I'm going to back the river up. I'm going to make a different path. We're going to try this. We're going to have a few do-overs, or we're going to have a few respawns, to use the parlance of the gamers. And we'll get it right, After I've done 50 or 60 respawns, I will know which way the river is supposed to go. And all during this idea of rethinking and regret, and I'm going to do this next time, and that's what's going to happen that time. Your river flows. And instead of gathering experience, you're just churning it up, frothing it up internally, getting no experience out of life, talking to yourself, listening to the voices in your head, getting no actual being, no actual, no song is being sung, no experience is coming into you, no relationship is entering your heart, no love is flowing out of you to another. You're just endlessly talking to yourself, thinking about what you could have done, should have done, would do next time, going to do that time, buy more insurance. Once you understand that you put all the doomers to the side, and you put all this nonsense to the side, and you take the risk, not of just entering the ocean, but of just entering the next moment. Take the risk of accepting where you are. I'm a river flowing downhill. And enter the next moment. I wonder where I'll flow next. I want to flow this way. Didn't work out. Okay. I'm exactly where I need to be. The river doesn't say, well, I should be over there. No. There's a much better riverbed over there. Much. No, we're in the riverbed that we're supposed to be in. Those rivers and the streams that we're used to. It's you're flowing exactly where you're supposed to be. You're experiencing exactly what you're supposed to experience. The next moment of life is unknown, unknowable, precious, and you're going to experience it and be ready for it and be in it. Don't miss it, because then you're not living. You're just talking to yourself.
Well, that's what I mean by not every part of you speaks to the other parts.
Yeah, very, very true.
It gets lost in the corner somewhere and blithers on about worries.
Well, or it grabs the mic and blithers on to everything around it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what doomers, that's the doomer is that it's some piece of you that it's endlessly wanting to speak about what's going to go wrong next and spouting fear.
Yeah, if you think about it, it's just wanting the control of the attention. It's, again, doesn't matter if it's positive or negative attention. As long as it has the attention. And what better way to have the attention than to have the mic or the microphone or the mouth
Mm.
And just talk over everything else that's there.
Yeah, and to imagine through all that talking that somehow you're influencing where your life will go next.
To believe that actually happens. There's an interesting thought.
Yes.
To actually believe that by endlessly going on about your worries, your concern, that somehow this is going to do something to change the flow of your life.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's mind-boggling, because you have to participate in life in order to help manage the flow of what you're doing.
And we all know people like that, who's rather than live their life, they endlessly talk about it.
Yes.
To themselves and others.
Right. The talking about it is really, it's, I guess in the back of their head they think that they're actually doing something, but it obviously not. You're obviously not helping yourself in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
You're just giving yourself agita.
Yeah. And you're not getting any experience from life, because rather than experience the moment of now, accepting it and experiencing it and then going to the next moment, you're actively rejecting the moment of now, saying this is not the right moment. This is a moment when everything's going to go wrong. Let me tell you what's going to happen next. Let me tell you what's going to happen after that. Let me tell you what an idiot you are. And you're not, all the moments of now, every precious life moment is being ignored. They're still, this is something we just can't emphasize enough. Your life is flowing regardless. Your ego can tell you everything about what's going to happen, and it doesn't happen, and it gets mad about it, or it gets sad about it. And it's going to tell you all the things that are going to go wrong, and something else goes wrong, and it gets mad about it. It's like, I didn't say that could go wrong. You know, right. I said all these things could go wrong. Well, that's going wrong. That's terrible. Oh, there's another burden on me. 500 things went wrong. Now 501 things went wrong. I mean, the ego gets mad about the fact that it can't control things.
Right.
You're not living. You're not living at that point, but it's still flowing past you. Life goes on, as the saying goes.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. You have to participate.
You got to take the risk.
And that's what he means by take the risk.
Yeah.
To understand that what's going on around you to the best of your ability, but also to understand, I'm going to still live in this moment. I'm going to enjoy life as it is.
I'm going to laugh. I'm going to love. I'm going to be sad or be happy. Be, in the sense of I'm going to be in that moment of sadness or be in that moment of happiness as a being.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the best way to say it is I feel sad. I'm going to feel sad in the moment of now, but I'm going to remain a being. I'm going to feel happy in the moment of now and remain a being. I'm going to seek joy, because joy has in and of itself a timeless element to it. Happiness seems too ephemeral a word to put upon a moment in life, but joy kind of nails it.
Mm-hmm.
In the moment of joy, you feel the timelessness. You feel the connection. You feel the connection to Source. The Source is nothing but joy. And when someone tells you all the doomer things and you go, yep, but I'm going to go enjoy myself anyway, it makes them just, what do you mean? Yep,
well,
still going to enjoy myself.
They wonder why can't you be as concerned about this as I am?
As I am. Do you understand how important this is?
Right. Why aren't you afraid?
Why aren't you afraid?
And that's usually a revelation to most people when they realize you really aren't afraid.
Yeah. We couldn't afford the luxury of fear.
It's an indulgence.
Yeah. And just as this poem really means to say is that the fear of non-existence is something that you don't have time to waste on.
Yes. Because fear itself blinds you to what's actually unfolding right in front of you. With fear, you have blinders on. You don't see everything, nor can you appreciate what is around you.
Exactly.
So, I believe we've reached the end of our hour.
I was afraid you were going to say that. But I think we flowed through this hour like Gibran's river. And I hope that we touch somebody out there, and that you'll be able to reconnect with Source when it's time. Right. And I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret. And thank you for listening.